Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Welcome. I think we've got a good number of people signed in now, so we'll kick off. Thanks for joining the Global Investigative Journalism Network webinar following the money investigating shell companies. It's one of the darkest corners of the financial world. It's great to see so much interest in shining a light in on this world. My name's Simon Bowers. I'm investigations editor at a non-profit called Finance Uncovered. We're based in the UK, but we're not really UK facing. We do trainings on financial journalism and are including shell companies, but it's primarily for investigative reporters working in parts of the world where that kind of thing is perhaps most needed and it's toughest to do. So we partner up with people. So if anyone feels like they're in that bracket and they want further help, come and have a look at Finance Uncovered's website, get in touch with me, and we could talk further. But today we're going to do a session. We've got two fantastic experts in this field with us. And we're going to dive into the topic of shell companies, exploring how investigative journalists in a practical way can unravel these complex networks, many of which are necessarily secretive in structure. But our two speakers today are sort of expert safe crackers at getting inside and under the skin of these often opaque structures. Many of the financial scandals, the biggest scandals in the world involve these mysterious entities, and understanding them, getting information about them is a real challenge. And it's far from easy. But when you understand a bit about the mechanics of how they're set up and where information is available, what information, then there are opportunities to use even slim disclosures to great effect. And I think we're going to hear that from our speakers. In this webinar, we've experts from ICIJ and OCCRP, and they're going to be sharing useful resources to help journalists navigate this challenging field, focusing on both the strategy of reporting and the relevant tips and tools. So just to introduce them, first we're going to hear from Carrie Keogh, who's ICIJ's Deputy Head of Data and Research. She started working with ICIJ on a project called Fatal Extraction. That was way back in 2015, and has worked on several ICIJ projects since: Pandora Papers, Uber Files, Ericsson Lists, Deforestation Inc., FinCEN Files, Solidarity Voices, Impact Files, and the Mauritius leaks. So quite a lot. So she's got great experience in this area. And so indeed has our second speaker, who's Jan Struijs, who is OCCRP's Chief Data Editor and co-leads OCCRP's research data team alongside Head of Research, Karina Shedrovsky. He works closely with OCCRP's editorial team and data teams, coordinating data analysis and working on data-driven investigations. Before joining OCCRP, Jan was a reporter with the German public news broadcaster NDR, where he worked on more of these collaborative investigation projects, cross-border, Luxembourg leaks, Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, FinCEN Files, and other cross-border investigations. Now, before we start, I also just want to, for the uninitiated, to say a bit about the Global Investigative Journalism Network, GIJN. It's the largest global network for a non-profit investigative journalism organization. It's got 251 member organizations at last count in 95 countries. But it works with journalists everywhere, in non-profits, in commercial organizations, in freelancers, everyone in the whole sort of ecosystem. And it's got a fantastic range of resources and tip sheets, which you can check out on its website, GIJN.org. And now, towards the end of this session, of course, we want to give you the opportunity to ask some questions of our speakers. So perhaps you can write some questions in the Q&A box, which you should be able to see, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. So when the way we'll structure it is when the two speakers have finished, GIJN's Amul Ghani will join us on screen to moderate those questions. And then the final thing from me at this stage is I'll just remind everyone that we are recording this session, so with a view to posting it later on YouTube. So please do bear that in mind. And that's really it. I'll now pass over to Carrie. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much, Simon. Thanks for the great introduction. So as Simon said, my name is Carrie Keogh. I am the Deputy Head of Data and Research at ICIJ, and shell companies are kind of our bread and butter. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, can everybody see that okay? All right, great. Let's get cracking. Okay. So today we're going to cover a couple of topics. We're going to ask, what is a shell company? Have a quick look at Open Corporates, the offshore leaks database, and then quickly some other sources. So the big question is, why do people want shell companies? What is so attractive about them for bad actors? And the answer is secrecy. They provide a degree of anonymity and protection that allows bad actors to get away with things. So they might be interested in tax evasion, sanctions evasion, money laundering, or perhaps you might have the individuals trying to hide political donations. So you might have a bad actor somewhere in the world who would like to make a political donation to a Western leader, and the best way that they can do that is through a series of shell companies so that nobody knows where the money truly comes from. Some characteristics quickly. They're usually a small company without an active business. It is kind of hollowed out, you know. They're generally found in secrecy jurisdictions, so you have to think the Isle of Man, the Cayman Islands, Seychelles, BVI. They're usually set up and run by service providers, or what we call formation agents. So these are companies where their entire business is to set up other companies. And they'll also provide other services like addresses, company officers and directors for them. They'll do some tax services as well. So often directors and company officers are what we call straw men. So they're only involved on paper. And some of these people will be either maybe employees of a service provider, or they'll be found by a service provider. This is in only some cases. And then the thing about them is that the ultimate beneficial owners, or the people really behind the companies who own them, we call them the UBOs. They can be really hard to trace. And that's the point of the shell companies. You might end up with layers of them like an onion to try hide the money of a very powerful individual. So to get cracking, we need a couple of pieces of information. You need a company name, an idea of jurisdiction, and a time frame. And by time frame, I mean like a loose time frame, because shell companies are not really new. They've been around since at least the 90s. So you need to have a rough idea. Are you looking in the 2020s, 2010s, 2000s, or the 90s? Okay. And so where I like to go is Open Corporates. It's usually my starting point. So this is a publicly open database with over nearly 223 million companies and 140 jurisdictions. As far as I know, this is the most comprehensive company database that is publicly available. You can search by company, name, or officer, which is really, really handy. And if you are tech savvy, you can also access their API. So just to give you a quick idea, I had how this works. I kind of threw in Google and it came up with 1,100 company names. So just to give you an idea how this works. So here you see you can filter by jurisdiction. This gives us so many different options here. So the filter by jurisdiction's over here. And you can also have a look by company type, industry classification, the type of data that they have as well. And if you see all the little flags beside, it gives you an idea of the jurisdiction. Now, if you have a look here, this is not a comprehensive list. Obviously, Google is an American company. a lot of these companies are registered in US states. But if you want to show all, there'll be many, many more jurisdictions. You can also filter by data held and then company type down here. And there's many, many pages of this as well. Okay, we are investigative reporters. Let's start investigating. So there's a company I want to look at. It's called Dukashu, and I suspect it's registered in the UAE within the last 10 years. So I'm going to jump onto Open Corporates, throw in Dukashu, and unfortunately, nothing's coming back. My next stop is something called ICIJ. So this is a subscription database, and it provides us with addresses, company officers, and company relationship information. It also kind of ingests a huge amount of information relating to risk of companies. So it might be sanctions, things like that. So I come up with Dukashu General Trading here. I see there's a little flag right here, which is for the UAE. And I have a USA OFAC number, which is really interesting for me. I have a registration date and an address. If I click around, I see that there's a shareholder, and his name is Daniel Joseph Kinahan. Now, Daniel Joseph Kinahan is actually the leader of a huge drug cartel in Ireland that left Ireland in the 2000s and went to Spain and then eventually the UAE and formed what they call a super cartel. So he's on OFAC sanctions list, and it gives me some bio information here, okay? So I have a USA OFAC number, I have a database, date of birth, which I can check, and an address. This is Daniel here, and he's here with a guy called Tyson Fury, who is a world heavyweight champion, because Daniel for a while was doing what they called sports washing, where he was very involved in the boxing industry. And what people allege was a way of kind of covering up his links to the drug world. So I get more information here about my company, Dukashu. It's in the UAE, an incorporation date, address, and I get a link to the OFAC sanctions list. I also have a profile for Daniel over here. I have his date of birth, which is really interesting, an address in the UK. So that's another of these little nuggets. The whole point of investigative journalism is that we collect these little nuggets, these like little pieces to start on, and then we start kind of chasing them down. And this information comes from the UK Companies House, so that tells me that somewhere else I could look. And then finally, if I go to the US Department of Treasury, it gives me a long list. It tells me a little bit about Dukashu General Trading, and there's also more information about Daniel. So that's kind of just one starting off point of how you can do this. Another is by using something called the Offshore Leaks database. So that's offshoreleaks.icij.org. This is sort of the fruit of all of our big global projects. So it's a searchable database. There's over 800,000 offshore companies, foundations, and trusts. Some of this has been extracted programmatically from the leaks. Some of this has been extracted by hand because some of these forms are handwritten. And it's all been verified and triple checked. So it has links to individuals in more than 200 countries and territories. And this is used like daily by law enforcement officers, investigative reporters, tax investigators around the world on a daily basis. And you can search by individual, company, and address, and is completely free and open to the public. So this is what the Offshore Leaks database looks like. You can search for persons, addresses, and companies right here. You can also search by our different investigations because they're obviously from different time periods and they cover different jurisdictions. So my favorite thing is to search for addresses, because the whole point of having, assets, whether it is a luxury yacht or a private jet or a townhouse in London or something, is that a person wants to own it. And somewhere along this like series of shell companies and paperworks, there will be thread back to that person. And often you find it is with using addresses. So a couple of tips are, I live in Dalkey, or I live in Dublin, and there's different ways to spell different neighborhoods. So there's an area here called Dunleary. There's lots of different ways you can spell it. So if you put them in here, you might have a look. This is another area nearby called Dalkey. You can start looking in some of the wealthier neighborhoods as well to see if any of those addresses are popping up that might be connected to shell companies. Remember as well, different translations. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about one of the stories from Pandora Papers my former colleague Will Fitzgibbon worked on. So Will found a lot of different assets related to that belonged to King of Jordan, which were kind of hidden through shell companies. And how did he do it? Well, this is also our power players as well. These are all on our website, and they tell you a lot more information about the different companies that are connected to these high-profile individuals. So these are all the shell companies that were connected to the King of Jordan, and we found them because in the Offshore Leaks database, his address was there, right? There was the Ragadan Palace, Amman, Jordan. That's how we found it. From there, we saw that there was an ultimate beneficial owner, Abdullah al-Sharif al-Hussein, and he was the UBO of Norbrook Properties Limited with an address in the BVI. And so from there, we went on to the Register of Overseas Entities, which is run by the UK government. And they managed to find a luxury property in the UK worth over £1 million, which was owned by Norbrook Properties Limited, so ultimately owned by the King of Jordan. So that's another way you can kind of find these nuggets and follow the track. It's like little breadcrumbs. This is another guy, Alisher Usmanov. He's an Uzbek Russian billionaire, very, very powerful man, and close to multiple senior Russian officials, including Mr. Putin. So if I am looking for a Russian oligarch and their assets, I do have a look at RUPEP. It's a really good resource, an interesting place to start. So it's just rupep.org. And it provides me a huge amount of information. Like I've said before, these are just nuggets. Everything has to be verified. Everything has to be checked and fact-checked before we can publish. We're just investigating and gathering information. So at this point, I would grab all this information and build a spreadsheet to try build a corporate profile of this individual. I can also look at my offshore leaks database. As you see, there are multiple different entries coming up. So these are probably all different addresses or different companies, but they could all be connected. And this is the offshore leaks database. So in this one example, we have 3 Alisher Usmanovs. He's they're all an ultimate beneficial owner of a couple of companies, and 2 are linked to the same address in Moscow. So the thing about the offshore leaks database is that these are nodes and you can expand them and explore in the data. So if I click that and explore a little bit, we see these 3 Alisher Usmanovs. Maybe the same person, probably would have to go check. They're the ultimate beneficial owner of Merville Investments, Midfield Investments, and Lavron Investments. They're all registered at this address in Moscow. So at this point, I'd be going on Google Maps, I'd be checking out the address, I'd be looking for, is this just an address where there's gonna be thousands of companies registered here, or is this like a luxury home? And trying to figure out a little bit more information about it. You can explore by clicking out even more, and 2 individuals pop up. So we have Ivan Tarvin and Vladimir Skok. So these are maybe 2 business associates. These are more nuggets and more little kind of breadcrumbs to go and try to follow and to try figure out more information. From there, you can check open corporates. Here we see there's an Alisher Usmanov, who is former director of some UK companies. So it might be worth checking to see if there's any assets in the UK that they own there. And different ways of doing that is you can use like Companies House to try find other companies there. Or you can go to the overseas companies that own property in England and Wales data set. Both are amazing resources. They're open, they're public, they're free. And the overseas companies that own property in England and Wales, this is an incredible data set of properties that are owned by companies from other companies, like a lot of them, well, some of them might be shell companies. This is another way we find these kind of luxury UK properties. Some other sources, some source documents are publicly available on our document cloud page. So this one I think this is from Pandora's papers, so it might be interesting for you to take a look. We also have these power players. I showed you the one before of the King of Jordan. So these are profiles of different powerful individuals. We have here 6 Russian peps and their families. So we'll put as many like resources as we can, like addresses and companies connected in there too. So you can kind of like piggyback on our work, and because we're all trying to achieve the same thing. And then we have, this is just an example. This is Gennady Timchenko, and these are what the power players look like. You can explore the data as well, connected to them. And then we have confidential clients. That was part of our FinCEN Files project. And we have more profiles here of different world leaders and world powerful individuals and world figures. You are welcome to download our data. You can download the offshore leaks data. It includes data from the offshore leaks, Panama Papers, Bahamas Papers, Paradise Papers, and Pandora Papers. And then take a look at the corporate registries. You'd be surprised what you might be able to find. There's some interesting things. These are just a couple to get you going, places you might want to look. It depends what you're looking for. And then these are some other resources of places to look. So there's open ownership. There's some subscription databases. If you have access to libraries or universities, they might have subscriptions to Orbis, IARI, Factiva, Arachnus. There are lobbying registers in some countries, which are really interesting. The EU Commission has one, and there are some in the US. Some European countries have them. There's the EU tender data as well. You can see which companies are getting public contracts. There's the public tender contract data in the US. Check out news outlets and reporting, Bellingcat resources guides. The corporate prosecution registry by Duke University is very interesting as well. And Private Eye have so that's the British property owned by offshore companies from 1999 to 2014. And I haven't mentioned Alaf yet because Jan is going to give you a wonderful presentation on that. But that is me. I just want to say thank you, and I'll pass you over to Simon now.
Thanks so much, Carrie. That's great. I just wanted to clarify a couple of points before we move on to Jan. You said that SARI, that subscription database, you found some good leads there relating to the Kinahan, the drugs lord. Is that the source for that information, or has that been harvested from somewhere else?
No, so it's one of these databases where it ingests information from different registries. So
Right.
The information is coming from the UAE
Right.
company's house, but it also pulls in information from all the sanctions lists as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
And would you say then that if reporters here had a lead that went to the UAE and they were struggling to get information from registries there, that would be a good database to sign up to?
That is a great place to sign up to. And the other thing is that in the UAE, a huge amount of the court records are open and the judgments are public. And we've had some really good success there. So it might be a case of translating things into Arabic or searching in English, but you might find company names in there because where people are taking civil cases, all that's open.
Fascinating. And just jumping back to the ICIJ data sets, obviously, I think a lot of people will, if they've taken an interest in shell companies, will have seen how to play around on the offshore leaks database that you referred to. But if I understand that right, though, that's a sort of like metadata, and that beneath that there's a whole potentially with some companies there's more detail.
Yes.
What would you say to a reporter who'd not worked with ICIJ before, who discovered an important company in their investigative work that appeared on ICIJ's the offshore leaks data set?
Oh, if you look, we are here to work with everybody. So email us at data@icij.org and we can organize access to the leaks, or we can help you and we can figure something out. Yeah. Because there's amazing data and there's also identification data, but we can't make that as publicly available. We have to go through agreements. Yeah.
Sure. Great. Well, thanks so much, Carrie. That was terrific. Jan, do you want to give us your perspective from OCCRP?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Thank you, Simon. Thanks, Carrie. That was really interesting. I'm not going to talk about Aleph too much, but let me share my screen and then I can explain. One sec. Okie doke. Is that visible for people? Can you see that? Sorry, for some reason my my screen disappeared and I can't see you anymore. Can someone give me a
yeah, we can see that.
Okay,
Jan.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I don't want to talk about Aleph too much because we just published, or GIJN just published a tip sheet for reporters that you should see on your screen right now, which is on the website, and it explains, I'm scrolling through it now, it explains how to use Aleph. So I thought for today, I'm not going to focus on Aleph too much. I thought about a bit of a different way of hopefully telling you something that might be interesting for you. But let's maybe start from the beginning. So my name is Jan Strotzig. I'm based in Berlin. I'm Chief Data Editor at OCCRP. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions regarding the things that I'm going to talk about, or any other things related to OCCRP data research. My email address is on the screen now. I just really briefly want to talk about OCCRP. It's the organization that I work for. It's an acronym for Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. We've grown quite a bit over the past years. We now have 50 local member centers. That's the model that we work with. So we work with local organizations, and we also work with a standing newsroom of our own reporters and editors. And I guess we have 180 plus, almost 200 people working at OCCRP in different capacities. We do have an office or headquarters in Amsterdam, but also an office in Sarajevo and Washington. And the organization has been in existence for 15 years, roughly. As Simon said in the beginning, thanks again, Simon, for the nice introductions. I'm working on the research and data team, and we run something called the Investigative Dashboard. It's available at id.occrp.org. I have a list of links at the end of the presentation. This is what it looks like. So, and it comes with a number of resources that might be interesting for you if you're investigating companies or people. There's a little button at the, well, it's a pretty big button, actually. We redesigned the website. So it says browse our free online resources. So if you go there, you will find ordered by regions and countries, you will find a number of resources, some of which Carrie already mentioned, some of which I might mention later on. Yeah, this is the URL. We also run something called Aleph. I showed you the GIJN article that will have all the information how to use Aleph, how to get the most out of it. It's available at aleph.occrp.org. So I'm going to move on from here. I thought about how I can add to what Carrie said, or what I was hoping she would say. And my idea was to give you one a little bit longer and one shorter example of how you can work with shell companies and the documents that you can actually get from some of these registers, and how you can pull information from a number of these different sources and maybe put it together like a piece of like a puzzle piece, put the pieces together and come up with a reasonable chain of proof for ownership and for shareholder information. That sounds very abstract, and it is. So we've put together an example. It's a little bit older. It's from, I think, 2023. And we were running a project back then when we tried to put together a list of basically Russian oligarchs and their assets across Europe. This is not my work, not exclusively my work. Everything that I show on the slide is from someone in my team, or we work together a lot on these things. This specifically is from Lara and Karina from the team. It all started with an article from The Guardian, and what the reporters noticed is that the Isle of Man, which is a little island next to the UK, and it's famous for registering yachts and private jets specifically. And it deregistered a lot of private jets and helicopters in one go, or in two goes, but within a short time period, they registered a lot of these helicopters, and that was close to changes in the sanctions regime. So our thinking was they wouldn't do this if there wasn't a reason for it. They know who the beneficial owners are, and we don't, but we would like to know. So you can go to the register. It's a public resource. You can just Google it and it will be available to you. You can search it. And we looked at some of these helicopters and we thought, well, it would be very interesting for us to know why they deregistered them, because we believe they belong to someone who has recently been sanctioned, right? This is a real quick quick excursion here. So these helicopters and also airplanes come with a registration number. It's kind of like a license number, and they usually start with a country code. I hope it's visible on screen right now. It might be a bit small. Can I resize this? That's not going to help. So if it starts with an M, that's Isle of Man. There are other country codes. So we were interested in finding out who is the owner, or whom do these helicopters belong to, right? So the first thing that my colleagues did was go to Twitter, back then, now X, because there's a lot of people who are interested in helicopters and aircrafts, and they follow them around. Well, not really follow them around, but whenever they land in the area, they might take pictures, they tweet about it. There's a whole community about it. Very, very good resources if you can find someone who's on the ground in an area that you're interested in. Try to make contact with them if you're interested in jets and planes. And they linked it to Chelsea FC owner Roman Abramovich in this tweet, but this doesn't really help anything with fact checking, or generally is not a really good resource, obviously, but it's a good first clue, right? So we went back to the aircraft registry, and it gives you the registered owner. This is kind of our first offshore entity here in this whole puzzle that we're trying to build. It is called Flambards or Flambards, I don't know how to pronounce it, Limited. It's registered in the Isle of Man. Very standard stuff. You will find this a lot if you investigate aircrafts or helicopters or jets in the Isle of Man. They usually are owned or held by a Isle of Man limited company. You can get information from the Isle of Man registry. It's not horrible. There's a set of documents that you will get for the company. And in this case, we got the information that there was one share, and this one share for this company was held by a company called Watton Overseas Holdings Limited. Excuse me. Watton Overseas Holdings Limited was originally registered in the BVI, which we saw on an older document, and then it was registered in Jersey, but we wouldn't know at this point that this was the same company. It looked like it was the same company, but we wouldn't really know. But now we had another address. So we had this company name. We had our second offshore entity in this case, and we had a Jersey address. So we went to the Jersey company registry, and we were hoping for some shareholder information there. Unfortunately, there was none. So the Jersey company was held by a Fin Service Trustees Limited. It's a dead end. We did not see Abramovich's name on this page, unfortunately. We did, however, find a document that proved that the original Watton Overseas was indeed the one that was moved to Jersey. So it was originally incorporated in the on the BVI, the British Virgin Islands, and was then moved to Jersey. So that's a good document to have, because if you have historic documents on Watton Overseas, then you can say, well, we know that the old one, when we're speaking about the old Watton, it's actually the same company. So now our puzzle looks a little bit like this. So that's better than before, but still, like, there's no name on it. We need to prove ownership, right? So what my colleagues did is they went back to what a lot of people do, back to Google, did some more specific Google searches. We knew that it was probably related to Russia, so we tried to search some Russian pages. And indeed, the name Wharton Overseas came up in a Forbes article, Forbes Russia article, amongst other things. And the article linked, and this is a really good document, the article linked to a asset declaration from Roman Abramovich when he was running for a local office. I don't exactly remember which office it was. The link was dead, but we were able to find the link in the Wayback Machine. The Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive, is a place where you can find archived links that are not available on the internet anymore. And it lists a number of interesting things. So it says Roman Abramovich. It's not super easy to read, but amongst other things, he owns a Volkswagen Golf from 2007. So there's some more fancy cars on here. There's a Moscow apartment, but it also lists a number of companies. So that's really, really good because we know that he filed this himself. So it's a good piece of proof, right? So now we are here and we could essentially stop our research at this point because we have proven that the UBO of Wharton, which was the other Wharton before, which is the owner of Lambert's, which is the owner of the helicopter, is Roman Abramovich. But we wanted to have a bit more, and we wanted to also be able to say a bit more about it, right? So this is great, but we went back to the Isle of Man documents and we found more in there. And we found indeed that there was a loan agreement between a company called Calveden Worldwide that then changed its name to Lindesa Worldwide Limited. This is also one of the patterns that you will see a lot. These people like to change the names of the companies. They like to move them from one place to another place. Sorry. Am I still here? Okay, I am. So, apologies. So I had a technical glitch here. The loan agreement says the aircraft with the serial number 68, etc., registration mark M-Heli. That's the one that we were interested in from the beginning, or one of the ones that we were interested in. And they used the money from Lindesa to pay for this aircraft. So the Isle of Man company used money from a different company to pay for the helicopter. That's great. So that's another puzzle piece here. Now we're obviously very interested in who gave Abramovich the money to buy his helicopter, right? So we went to one of these paid databases that Carrie mentioned. I think this is Lexis. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's Lexis. And there was an article in, I think, a Swiss magazine, the Tagesanzeiger, where they said that Lindesa was one of the vehicles, one of the offshore companies that Abramovich used to finance the Chelsea FC, the football club that he owns. And he does it through a third entity, Fordstem. So Fordstem was basically the company that owned the Chelsea FC investments, and then Fordstem would get money from Lindesa. So that's a really good clue because it's publicly known that he's the owner of Chelsea FC. So we went to pull the Fordstem documents, and indeed it listed two interesting things. At the bottom, it says the controlling party of this company structure is Mr. Abramovich. And then above it says Lindesa Worldwide, the company that we were interested in, is part of this corporate group. So now we're at the end of our puzzle. I went through this exercise to show you that it does make sense to pull all of these different documents from these registers, even though each individually are not going to be super extremely helpful. And some of them are deliberately vague and don't give you a lot of information, but still it makes sense to take this information, go Google, go use other OSINT techniques, go try to find more, and then put together the pieces in the end. So this allowed us to publish the information that these helicopters were indeed owned by him. And if we go back to the beginning, the good thing about this is that we proved it for the one helicopter here, but the Flambards Limited was the owner of more than one, so that automatically worked as a proof as well. I have a second quicker one, which is an example from Cyprus or Denmark, depending on how you want to look at it. We got a request about a company called TNC Service, and the company was supposed to be registered in Cyprus, but we didn't really know a lot about it. So let me say from the beginning that you can get information from Cyprus. You have to pay for it. You can even get ownership information. It usually takes a while and it's not super straightforward. So my colleague, and this is an example that Misha worked on for my team, my colleague tried to figure it out in a different way. So what he did was, of course, go back to Google. And he made an interesting observation. He found that TNC services in Cyprus, if he Googled it in some different combinations and using some different words, it would very often pull up results that mentioned Denmark or were related to Denmark. And Denmark is good. So if you find something that's related to Denmark, that's pretty good, because in the Danish register, you will find a lot of information. So he went to the Danish corporate registry, and he did indeed find that the company of interest, the TNC Services, was in the registry as the founder of a Danish company. The name of the Danish company is at the bottom. It's Hordais Denmark or something like this. We are not really interested in the Danish company, but we are interested in the Cyprus company. And the good thing is that the Danish registry will give you beneficial owners. So you can sort of see through the link of companies, right? If you have one company that's owned by another company, owned by another company, some registries will just give you the name of the person on top because they are legally obliged to. So he did use this to prove that the Cyprus company, which was owning the Danish company, was indeed owned by these people from Bratislava in Slovakia, which was something that the reporter was working on. It was an interesting and valuable piece of information for their story. They also used the Cyprus address on the Danish company's documents, which is another interesting piece of proof, but I don't think you need it at this point. Yeah, that's a quicker example. Basically, what I want to show you here in both of these examples, the longer one and the shorter one, is it's very good to be persistent and just go look at registries and at sources where you are not sure you will get any information. Some of them you have to pay for it. So the Isle of Man, I think you have to pay a few pounds to get the information. The same is true for Jersey, but it's usually not extremely expensive. And then it makes a lot of sense to go up and down the chain and try to find a jurisdiction that is known for being transparent and being holding a lot of information, right? Like Denmark, for example. Use different OSINT techniques. I think it's a no-brainer. If you have a name, if you have a new clue, just go back to Google, go back to Twitter, go back to other social networks. It's very specific to the region that you're interested in. So obviously, if you're investigating something that's related to China, the social network that you might type in the person's name or the company's name is going to be a different one as compared to, let's say, North America or Europe. Also try to get the official documents if it's important for you, for your newsroom that you're working in, to have the original proof from the source document. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that it's if you start working with these types of investigations, it's a good idea to build some sort of vocabulary. So let me go back real quick. So the Jersey company document listed a company called Finservice Trustees Limited as the owner, right? And if you've looked at some of these documents, if you've built some experience with these types of researches, you will know that this is very, very likely to be a dead end because a trustee company just won't hold any further information. It's just specifically set up to hide who the original owner is, right? So there are some of these terms around investigating offshores where you can you will come across these terms multiple times if you do this work. And it's good to know what is worth pursuing, what is not worth pursuing, and also what some of these things mean. And then the last point is ask for help. I mean, I put my email address up here. Some of the people in my team are very approachable for these kinds of things. They know more about this than I do. So Same is true for GIJN. They are very helpful. ICIJ is very helpful. So just reach out to people who have experience in this type of research and investigation. These are the links, some of which we already looked at. Carrie mentioned, I think, probably all of them. Maybe not Open Sanctions. Open Sanctions is a cool tool run by a friend of mine that basically collects information on sanctioned companies and people. It's very good, very up to date. And that's it from my end. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Do we open this up for questions now, Simon, or what's the plan?
Well, I'm just gonna be cheeky and have a couple myself, and then we're going to a sort of formal Q&A. But I just wanted to ask you. It was really interesting as you were going through some of those examples there. You could see, you know, you peel back the onion and you got to another layer, and it was another sort of corporate shield, and eventually you got to Abramovich. I was wondering, you know, what happens when you get to something that isn't necessarily a shell company or a corporate entity, but is a natural person, a human being. And maybe you don't recognize that name. What strategies do you have in those circumstances? Would you and I'd love to hear what you think about, you know, are all these declarations of the ultimate beneficial owners, are they trustworthy, or are you sometimes skeptical?
Yeah, it's a hard to answer generally, I would say. I can answer maybe with an anecdote. I remember that when we were investigating the Panama Papers and we looked at all the different companies and all the different directors and secretaries and sometimes also owners, there were names of people who literally came up tens of thousands of times, right? So after maybe encountering the same person for the 5th or 10th or 100th time, you would probably figure out that this is not the owner of a huge business empire, but it's a straw person, straw woman in the case that I'm thinking of. But so one of the things that I think are really good is what Carrie showed, is go to, for example, Open Corporates and just type in the name. And if you see that the person pops up 500 times or 100 times or 1,000 times, then it's probably someone who's just giving their name for someone else, right? And if that's not the case, or even if that's the case, that might be an interesting story in itself, right? But if that's not the case, there are a number of tools and ways to also investigate people. I mean, we can probably have a second webinar on that topic. We use a number of paid databases, for example, that work in a similar way as Sayari does, where you can put in an email address or a phone number. Most of the times you will not only get the name, but you will get some extra information, some extra properties, like an address. Addresses are really good. Phone numbers are really good. Email addresses sometimes are really good. So my suggestion would be to sort of start collecting these, build a profile around this person, and then go from there. And eventually, at some point, you will find that they are, I don't know, Facebook friends with the person that you're investigating or something like this. And then that's a pretty interesting lead, right?
Brilliant.
But sorry, the one thing that I wanted to say is that it depends a bit on the jurisdictions, but I would generally say that if you pull a original source document from a register, you have to kind of trust this information to a degree, right? There's not much you can do if the Cyprus registry lies to you or the German registry lies to you. You kind of have to rely to this, rely on this information to a certain degree.
Brilliant. That's terrific. Okay, well, thanks very much to both of our speakers. That's great, Jan, Carrie, thank you. I think we're going to throw it over now. Amel, are you around to go through the Q&A?
Hi, yes. So we do have a lot of questions. I prioritized some. So I think one of the first ones we got was how often is Open Corporate updated, and like how reliable is the information that's present there?
Oh, I think it's updated almost every day, as far as I know. The information is, in my experience, it's been extremely reliable. Now, saying that, you might have the directors in there who could be straw men. So if possible, I'd always go to the registries and confirm, because like I say, like everything has to be fact checked. But generally it's pretty solid. It's good.
Right. And another one we got was, what is the difference between the OCCRP Aleph database and the Open Sanctions database?
Well, they are two separate databases. OCCRP's Aleph includes, we pull in the data from Open Sanctions with their approval, so they're okay with it. The difference is that we collect other sources and other leaks, for example, and other types of data as well. And Open Sanctions is purely, more or less, purely focused on sanctioned entities.
Right. And another question we got was, so how do you know which companies to investigate, right? Because shell companies can be used for a lot of purposes. So how do you know that a particular shell company is being used for something nefarious like corruption, etc.?
So look, it could be a tip. You might hear a tip. It could be just a name that pops up in a strange place that looks really unusual. You could see like a contract that looks really unusual or a loan agreement, something like that. So we're still reporters. You still need to use our sources and, you know, research.
If I may add to this, one of the reasons that I use the helicopter example, or that I like it, is exactly that, right? We are not interested in shell companies for the sake of investigating shell companies, but they usually stand for something like an asset transfer or the ownership of something, and that's what you want to figure out. So for us, I would say most of the stories or most of the investigations start with the thing or the share or whatever they may hold, and then you want to figure out what the whole puzzle looks like.
Okay, so we got two questions that are kind of similar. So one is about how do you organize information visually, like to show different connection points between individuals and companies, and then other is how do you keep information organized?
So at ICIJ, we use Neo4j to kind of connect the dots, as you see in Offshore Leaks database. And then within the data and research team, we have these extensive spreadsheets where we have tons of columns and rows, and we fact check it extensively. And this is how we kind of like layer things out between ownership of like oligarchs and different companies, and then assets as well. So spreadsheets, Google Sheets, and Neo4j.
Yeah, I really like the visualization on the ICIJ database. It's really cool. You can just, it also wiggles a little bit, I think. Or did you remove that? No, that's still there, right? You can build network diagrams in Aleph if you want to. So there's a functionality for it. You can sort of build the graph or the corporate network. And we also, on top of that, use a wiki system. Think of it like a Wikipedia that's only available to people who work on a story or on an investigation, and where you can go in and basically create pages per company, per person, whatever you're investigating, right? And that's hosted by us, that's run by OCCRP, and that's only available or accessible to people who are on this specific investigation. But it's a good way of gathering knowledge that's maybe a little less structured than a data set would be, right? Or that doesn't necessarily fit into a spreadsheet because you need to write a paragraph to explain the nuances. So that's something that we like to use.
Okay, so I think this might be our final question, but so another one is, are there any basic digital security precautions you guys take when researching tricky jurisdictions online, when conducting internet research?
Well, I use a VPN, so Proton VPN as well. One of the reasons is because I work from home, so I don't want people to know my home IP. And yeah, that would be the main one for me, I think. What about you, Jan?
Yeah, we have a policy, and people use VPNs as well. I think it's good to protect yourself, and then on top of that, what we also do, there's not so much protection, but we also for the team created a few accounts on platforms that are not linked to people's names, or real people's names at least. So that makes it easier to, I don't know, let's say you want to look at someone's profile on LinkedIn or on Facebook. So you don't have to use your own profile for that. that's kind of the very basic stuff. And then what we usually try to do is assess if we start a project, if we start working in a region, for example, to assess the specific risks, and then it's a bit easier to take measures if you know what you're up against, right? And if you know who you're going to be investigating, that maybe means that you behave a little bit differently on the internet.
Right. Should we ask more, Simon, or should we close now?
I think we've time for a couple more if there is some out there.
Okay, so another one that we have is there are basically questions about how to investigate companies within specific jurisdictions. Like one is about investigating in Vietnam companies, and another is about finding more information about companies in Delaware specifically. So region-specific resources, if you guys have.
So Delaware is a tricky one because it is a secrecy jurisdiction. With Delaware, I would generally use ICIJ to try grab as much information from the registry as possible. I'd also check the different counties in the state and see their business registries. Sometimes you see that property can be bought and sold in the US using family trusts. So occasionally they'll pop up in like these business registries occasionally. The other things I'd use as well is PACER, which are the court records, to see if there's any information about those companies in there too that you could maybe trace to an address and trace to individuals. And Vietnam, I probably would use SARI as well, and then ALF. And I don't have a huge amount of experience with Vietnam, but usually with different companies in Asia, we try use the usual things: open corporates, ALIF, and SARI.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to this. We have the on the ID side, id.occrp.org, we have country-specific resources available, but I can't say from the top of my head how good the information is for Vietnam, for example. But feel free to go there. It's just available on the public internet, and there might be some good information there.
Right. So another question we have is, what about using documents that are leaked and not from the original source? So how would you go about verifying those documents?
So leaked documents, we try to go to the company registries and see if we can verify all the information. That'd be the number one thing. So we use leaked information all the time, but we have to verify it. And that might just be incorporation dates and addresses and things like that.
Yeah, fully agree. Leaks are great. We love leaks. Everyone loves leaks, but they can also be make life more complicated, because all of a sudden you have a piece of information that you kind of want to use, but you don't really get it. We can't really get it past fact check just from a leak, so you have to go somewhere else and find a second or third source. So that's at least what we do at OCCRP. We won't publish it purely on the basis that it was given to us as a leaked document and we can't verify or corroborate it.
Okay, so another question, we got two of these also. One is basically is all of your research online, or do you at some point also go out into the field to start verifying information, addresses and things? So if you could speak a bit more to that.
So do you mean are all of our sources online, or all of our
Your
working?
research, all of your working, yeah.
I mean, yes, and we don't publish everything that not everything is publicly available. Like we'd have our own team directories and information and databases where we keep some stuff. If we're not 100% on something, we're not going to publish it as well. You know, there's things that we're fairly certain of, but unless it's been checked and verified, we have amazing fact checkers who come in as well and tear everything to shreds, which is exactly what we want them to do to be as safe as possible. So what we put out there is everything that we are as certain as humanly possible about, but we are quite conservative with this. And regarding sources, we use lots of different things. On the ground reporters. Oh, right. Yeah. We do a lot of underground reporting too. Yeah.
Can I just ask you to one or both of you to clarify? I mean, I think one of the important components of the verification checks, I think this would be interesting to everyone, is obviously you can do your preliminary verifications as part of your as the investigation is ongoing. But I think I'm right in saying that both OCCRP and ICIJ before publication would put their findings in some detail to the people you're writing about, and that would offer a chance to shake out any sort of innocent but incorrect assumptions that you've made, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have our right of reply process. So we generally, the way it works is we'd have a data reporter working with an editor and reporter. Simon was one of them at some point, worked together, and we put our findings together. A fact checker comes in and we have to footnote everything, and then we go to right of reply, and that's the point where we're telling people what we're going to say about them. And sometimes a small error might come in, and we're able to go and correct that. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a very similar process, and it's from my experience, it's a very crucial moment in the whole investigation, because you sort of build up this idea of what might have happened, and then in some cases, people have really good answers that make you go back to the drawing board and reconsider. And I remember stories that we were certain would be good stories, and we published them, and there was a good answer or a good explanation for what we were looking at, and then we just didn't publish it. So it happens. It's part of the whole journalism game, I would say, and it's very important. I also think it's right that we do it, and we should do it.
Thank you. Okay, so another question is about how do you combat disinformation, or how do you figure out that the story is now ready to be published? So what is the point where you decide, okay, we've fact checked, we verified, and now we can publish this information?
Also with ICIJ, when we work on projects, we have lots of partners. And so usually there's a date that we agree with our partners that we're going to go live. It's the same with OCCRP. We work with them an awful lot. So that's the point. And it's a case of sitting down with the editors, the managing editor, and the reporters, and being like, does this story reach the threshold? And is this good enough? Is often the kind of question we have. And also, does the story need to be told? Is this really important?
Yeah, I mean, the last bit, sorry to jump in there, but the last bit is actually something, and especially with these leaks or also documents that you pull from registries, etc., that also in most of the cases means that you put someone's personal information into the public space to some degree, right? And there might be a good reason for it, but I think you actually have to verbalize and write down this reason and make it part of your reporting. Why are you doing this? Why are we interested in Abramovich's helicopters, right? It's his good right to own a helicopter. Is it? Question mark. Maybe, maybe not. As a sanctioned person, should this helicopter be in Europe if the person is sanctioned that owns it and he tries to hide this kind of ownership, right? That's one of the argument chains that we go through. And I think it's a very important process, especially when you look at leak data, but also when you look at data that comes from corporate registries that will have all the information on it, and people will be able to reproduce some of this research at least, right? If we publish something on a Cyprus company, people can go and get this information and can have the phone number and the address of this person. It's just how things go.
Right.
How are we doing?
I think we're doing well. We still have some time. So we have a lot of questions about region-specific stuff. So I'm trying to generalize a bit also. So another is about open corporates again, and how effective is it in getting information from regions like Asia or other countries outside, which are not part of the Western countries, right?
So I think it's pretty good, but it country by country completely depends on what sort of company register they have and how open it is. And I live in Ireland, and they do have some information from Ireland, but this is effectively a secrecy jurisdiction. It's very difficult to get information in Ireland. So it isn't so much about Asian countries as a whole. It's country by country specific, how open that country is. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, Carrie, you probably agree, but open corporates is not specifically Western focused, at least from my experience. So they try to get data from everywhere, I would say.
Okay, and another one is about RTI requests. How beneficial have you found RTI requests in different areas?
Yeah, like in general, pretty good. So a couple of years ago with the wonderful Emmy, we did this project called Implant Files, which is completely based on freedom of RTI's right to information, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
freedom of information requests. So like I always put in a freedom of information requests if I can to different places. And sometimes you do it just to verify what you think you have in a leak as well. If you're able to do that with a government agency, or if you're able to do that with like if you're looking at contracts as well, and things like that, looking for correspondence. Generally, they're a very powerful tool, and if you can use them, absolutely go for it.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. So another question I think which would address a lot of the other questions we're getting is which jurisdictions are providing open beneficial ownership information nowadays?
So there is the website Open Ownership, and that will give you a different idea of jurisdictions. Off the top of my head, I mean, in the UK, there is the person of significant control, but like that's not always accurate because there's no verification done by Companies House on that. So, I mean, I take it with kind of a pinch of salt. There is Open Ownership, that website. In Ireland, it's not here. We don't have it. I don't know off the top of my head. You'd have to look country specific. But Open Ownership would be where I'd start. And just remember, like, it might not be completely correct. It could be a straw man.
I mean, technically, any European Union country should, and some do it better. I mean, we used the Denmark example in the slides, but some just also don't care too much about the direct. I think it's a directive, but apparently that's about to change. And there's also the idea of a EU-wide ownership registry, which I think now has 5 or 6 countries. So it's not great, but it's a starting point. Yeah, and then that for some countries it's also super hard to say. So for example, the US are very they don't have like centralized registers for most things. So you would have to go from state to state or even sometimes county to county to get the information.
Sorry, just to add to the point Jan was making there, I think there was a critical judgment in Europe about a year ago in Luxembourg that meant that the rollout of beneficial ownership requirements via the directive was effectively killed. So it's very patchy. Some have kept it going. Some have turned that facility off. And so it's very irregular and full of uncertainty. There were attempts to repair that function, but where it's going to land, in what diluted form, and whether journalists, investigative journalists, will have privileged access to this information, that's an ambition, but with some politicians, but it's by no means certain. That's all still in flux, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, but you should try, and everyone should try, and the more people try, I think if we all go and ask all the European countries tomorrow if we can get access, that's probably a good sign. Most of them would say no, but I try to be optimistic and hopeful about this. And I think also given where we have come from, where like times in the past where people used bearer shares and you had like Swiss numbered accounts that didn't even have a name associated with them in internal databases, really, right? So it's all going in the right direction in Europe, but it's going very slowly, which is true for a lot of things in Europe, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. So,
Right.
Kerry, there was a database that you referred to about UAE court records. Is there like a particular database or there's like general court records?
Sorry, it goes by emirate to emirate. So I can probably post a link later. There was one for Dubai that we were using. We managed to find a property. This is part of Dubai Unlocked that was run by OCCRP. We managed to find a property that was owned by Daniel Kinahan's wife, Quiva Robinson, using those court records. So I can probably post a link later. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's Dubai court records was essentially what we Googled. And it came up in a, the way we found it was it came up in a news notice that there was an action, and then we managed to go to the records. So we just like Googled it.
Amel, this feels like a good moment to finish. We're just about at time. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, I will just then say thanks for all the great questions, and thanks so much to Carrie and Jan for their fantastic presentations. Everyone should check out the Twitter feed for GIJN. That's at GIJN for more detailed of future events. And yeah, thanks, huge thanks for GIJN for organizing this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Kerry.
Thanks.